Tim Sinclair, a graduate of Mahomet Seymour High School in 1996. So I was born and partially raised in Detroit. That was a very long time ago. We don't need to give years, but in sixth grade, my family moved to Mahomet. That's where I went to junior high and high school and did live there for a while. Now I'm back in Champaign after a time in Chicago and Huntsville, Alabama, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I went to the University of Illinois. I thought I was going to be an architect, so that's what I went to college to study. But about 3 semesters in, I discovered radio and using my voice to make a living. And I left college, jumped into radio full-time, and ultimately never looked back.
Tim, you have been the voice/PA announcer for the Fighting Illini men's basketball for 10 years now. What went into this?
You know, it was luck for the most part. I didn't plan it. I started doing a baseball game at Illinois a number of years ago and then got chances to do softball and wrestling and volleyball and swimming and diving. I did literally every sport except for basketball and football. But then all of a sudden one day they asked if I had interest, and I said, yeah, absolutely. And so in 2015 was my first year, which means this fall I'll be starting my 10th season with Illinois basketball. So far so good.
What intrigued you the most about being called the PA announcer?
You know, Illinois is largely where I grew up, at least for much of my memory, 6th grade on. And so the only big-time games I ever remember going to were here at Illinois. I remember Jim Shepard's voice. I remember the sound of the band and the cheerleaders. And like that whole environment here, it's just really, really special. And Orange Crush, of course, and back in the day, Chief Illiniwek, all that just sort of was implanted in my memory. And so to be now the voice that other people get to experience when they come to games is pretty cool. Again, I never planned it. I never would have thought it was something that was in my future, but I'm incredibly fortunate and incredibly thankful that it did, and it's an honor every day to step onto this court.
When did you realize you had this in you?
You know, when I started in radio, I started to see that maybe I could use my voice to make a living, but I never attributed it to sports at all. It was really just being on the radio and being a DJ. I think it was 2011 when the Chicago Cubs decided that they were going to look for a new PA voice at Wrigley. And as a radio bit, my co-host Pam and I decided, it'd be kind of fun to, one, talk about it because we thought our audience would be interested, but also have me apply. And so I applied along with 3,000 other people for that job. And long story short, I got second. Went up to Wrigley twice, got to be on the mic there. I met Ernie Banks, I met the Ricketts family. It was a really fun experience. And though I didn't get the job, I did get the confidence that maybe someday I did have what it took to do this at a professional level. And so it was disappointing, of course, but it really allowed me to think bigger about my career.
Took it more seriously after finishing second out of 3,000 applicants to be the Chicago Cubs PA.
What is the number one thing that excites you the most about this job?
I think it's the opportunity to help fans be fans. Like, they do a great job on their own, but my job, I feel like, as the PA voice, is to reflect what the crowd is feeling in a moment, or maybe should be feeling or could be feeling in a moment. And so being a part of that process and being kind of the fan with a microphone, surrounded here by the Crush, or at other events I do with just thousands and thousands of people out there kind of all cheering the team at the same time, to lead that or be the most vocal part of that is an honor. I love it.
You are a voice of many sports. Bears, Bulls, Illini, Chicago Fire, Big Ten title football, NBA All-Star Weekend. As far as all of that, which one do you enjoy the most?
It's like choosing your favorite kid. I can't pick one that I like the most, but I will say this. I do like them all for different reasons. Basketball, this is almost where I get to sit for Illinois games and for Bulls games and for the high school state championships. Being on the court surrounded by the crowd, up so close with the players, is amazing. I love that feel because I'm kind of experiencing what the players are experiencing. Football, you're usually much farther away. You're kind of watching it all take place down in front of you rather than being a part of it. But it's difficult. You're talking in football all the time. There's 22 people running around on the field in helmets. They're far away. They're constantly changing as to who's at what position. So there's a difficulty in that I truly enjoy. I like it being hard to do. Soccer, it's called the beautiful game for a reason, but I get to just watch soccer for the most part. We only talk, hit or miss in a soccer match. So I like them all for different reasons. All-Star Weekend is just a show. It's a big event. I'm on TV a lot, at least my voice is. So there's an extra pressure that goes along with that. So I can't pick a favorite, but I can pick reasons why certain parts of each are my favorite. Opened up a career path that I never could have seen.
Hello, Bulls Nation. I'm Tim Sinclair, and welcome to the United Center.
These days, Sinclair is under contract with 4 teams: the Bulls, Bears, Fire, and Illini men's hoops. Add in NBA All-Star activities and IHSA championships, and he works more than 100 events a year. That's a lot of games and a lot of names.
Preparing for the game from when you begin to the end of the game, how much time goes into that?
It partially depends on the sport, but typically I get to an event 2 to 3.5 hours early. Typically there's some sort of meeting where we run through our script. I make sure I read through everything, make notes, all that kind of stuff. And then we have at least a partial run through where certain events that are happening, nothing in game, but during timeouts, pregame, halftime, etc., we will test them out on the court or on the field just to make sure that everybody's in the same spot. We got people who are running lights, people who are running cameras, people who are running sound, me, performers, all sorts of things. So everybody kind of needs to know what's happening, and that's what that time is for. Then there's always food, which I never complain about. Free food's always good. And then typically about an hour before the game starts, I have to be at my seat ready to start giving announcements as people start coming through the doors. So that's the pregame. Then, the game happens, and afterward, typically I can leave right away, say what the score is, thank you, safe drive home, and then I drive home myself.
What would be the toughest obstacle that you face on the job?
I think the easy answer is probably trying to pronounce names correctly. That's a big part of the job, and there's lots of long names, lots of foreign names, lots of names that don't sound like they look and look like they sound. But typically, once you get the hang of that, it's not too bad. I think ultimately the most difficult part is saying things in the right way, at the right time, in such a way that it's not an act. Like, I never want to be an actor. I never want to be, that guy's just paid to be excited for a team that's not doing very well, for example. I think there's an art to saying words with the right cadence, with the right energy, with the right volume for that specific moment. A three-pointer in the first half that, puts you up 3 versus a three-pointer at the end of the second half that gives you the lead are different. My words might be the same, but the way I say them is going to be different because the way the crowd reacts to them is going to be different, and I just want to reflect that. So I think the hard part is really reading the room and knowing how to say what I'm going to say in such a way that it fits the situation and not just be turned up to 11 all the time where I feel like, my job is to be loud and be a cheerleader and people are going to come along with me regardless. That's not what I ever want to do. So, but there's some nuance there, and there is some difficulty in going, okay, how do I reflect this feeling, this thought, this play in a way that makes sense right now, and it isn't just sort of universally used throughout a game when it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that way. And DeMar, because most people repeat that back to me, if they do a call back to me, they're always like, DeMar DeRozan, DeMar DeRozan. I was a fan of Illinois first. We moved from Detroit, Michigan when I was going into 6th grade. So I, back then, was Pistons and the Lions and the Tigers and Red Wings, even University of Michigan at the time. But moved to Illinois, and all of a sudden I'm surrounded by this incredible campus, and I'm going to football games and I'm going to basketball games. And so Illinois became that first team that I really took hold of when we moved to Illinois all those years ago. But then the Bulls were getting real good real fast about that same time. It was the beginning of the first three-peat when we moved. And so my allegiance switched pretty quickly over to the Bulls, and same with the Bears, not necessarily because of the runs they were having, but just because they were the local team that everybody here cared about. So Illinois was first, but when we're in season, I'm a diehard for all of them. I will say it does take a lot of time, and it does take a lot of sacrifice, and sometimes money when you're driving to and from Chicago that wouldn't necessarily be the case if I weren't doing these jobs. But when you love something, you're willing to sacrifice for it, and you're willing to put in the time and the energy and the effort to do what other people won't. And I fell in love with this well before I was good at it, and well before anybody was willing to give me a microphone to talk to more than a couple hundred people at a time. So because I fell in love with it back when I first got to do a random softball game, it gave me what I needed to put the time in so that I could do a Bears game or NBA All-Star Weekend or Illinois basketball or whatever. So when you love it, it doesn't feel like work, and it doesn't feel overwhelming. It's just like, hey, I get to do more of what I already love to do, and there aren't too many people who have a hard time doing that. I'm not this amazing, diligent worker, I don't think. I wouldn't say that. A lot of the people have mentioned it. I'm like, I'm just doing what I love. And when that's the case, the rest is pretty easy. I mean, lots of people have good voices. Lots of people can read. Lots of people love sports. You know, I think I have those things, but I don't think any of them per se makes me unique. My background in TV and radio has really helped me be flexible and able to do things in the moment that aren't scripted on a piece of paper. And I think that is probably one of the two things that I would say makes me unique, in that, sometimes you have to read a script or call the game exactly as it's happening, but sometimes something goes wrong, or we have to change something. It happens in NBA All-Star Weekend all the time. We're like, oh, we're going to do this. We don't have time. We're going to this. And by the way, TNT is carrying it. Go. To be able to not freak out in that moment and go, I don't have a script. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. To have the ability to just do that off the cuff, I think, is one of the things. And then we already talked about the other one a little bit, and that's the reading the room and not being the same guy all the time in every moment, because every moment is not the same. And I think a lot of people come into this type of job with, I'm going to sound like what I think public address announcers sound like, and I'm going to do that all the time. And that's, one, fake, and two, not relatable. I mean, people know that that's not how any actual human is. And I want to bring a human element to it and kind of rise and fall with them as the game goes on. So those two things, I think, really set me apart, at least somewhat, from what others do on a regular basis. And so far, so good.
So where do you get your energy from?
Well, Diet Dr. Pepper for one. But the other, as we've discussed a little bit, is just the love of what it is. Like, if someone were to call me, if I wasn't doing any of this and someone called me and said, hey, do you want to go sit courtside in an Illinois game? I don't care what was going on. I would go, yes, let me get ready. I'm out the door. Or at a Bulls game, or go sit in the press box for a Bears game. Like, I would jump out of my seat and go do that immediately. I would find whatever strength, energy I needed to go. Now I get to do that for every single game, and they feed me and pay me and give me a spot to park, and it's just, I don't need to find energy. It finds me, for sure.
Feeling the crowd here as we sit down on the court, when the players are running out and the lineups are getting introduced, and you're like, hey, now, like, what's going through your mind in that moment?
Yeah, I think for a long time, when you experience it as a fan, it kind of feels like the fans feed off the announcer. So when I go, here come your Fighting Illini, and then people are crazy, they run out, they smoke. To me, it's the other way around. Like, you can feel that building up. They have a great video. Our video department at Illinois is incredible. They put together this hype video, and then they show the team, in the tunnel getting ready to come out. And so the arena has an energy that you can't really quantify, but you can tell when you're here that it's there. And people are just ready to cheer. And so for me, I'm just sort of feeding off of that. You know it's about to happen, and whether I said that line or not, I don't know that it ultimately makes a big difference, but it's part of it. It's like the smoke that goes up in the air. It's like the band that starts to play. It's like crushers going crazy, the cheerleaders with the flags, like all those little bits and pieces make up the totality of what that moment is, or what our starting lineups are. And so I'm just a little piece of that, but I know that when we're all feeling the energy collectively and doing our jobs correctly, it really becomes something pretty special. So it's hard to go, here's an ABC of what you do, but if you can find a way to channel the energy that's already here and do it in a way that's real, authentic, not distracting, I think that's when the real magic happens. And thankfully, we've got a bunch of people in this place who know exactly how to do that. So this is the tunnel that not only I come out of on game day, but the entire Fighting Illini basketball team. This is where the smoke comes in the air and they run out onto the court. And it's a little different in here than normal because it's off season, and so they don't have everything set up. But technically, the team bench is all along here, and then somewhere right in here, the scorer's table starts. So Brian Barnhart and Deion Thomas are on the end doing the radio broadcast. We've got some of the sports information directors and things sitting here. And then right at center court is where you'll find me and a microphone, a director on one side, the official scorer on the other side. And the reason for this setup is when the officials come to give information to the scorer's table, the official scorer needs it, of course, because he's running it all down. I need it, of course, because I'm telling the crowd what's happening. And then our director is sort of arranging all the other things that are coming on and off the court during a game. So that all happens at about this 6 or 7 feet. And the rest of that goes to visiting team radio, goes to some other people who are keeping track of score, who are doing the shot clock, the game clock, putting the score on the scoreboard. It's probably 10 or 15 people in reality who make everything happen. But thankfully, I get to sit here right in the middle.
Here come your Fighting Illini. From Chicago, number 0,
Favorite game to have called for the Illini games?
There's a lot that come to mind. When we rededicated this place as State Farm Center after they'd done all the renovations, when they named it Lou Henson Court and put the signature on the court, that was super cool. But I would have to pick 2, both against Iowa. I think it was 22 and 23. Now, they were very different games because the first one was a nail-biter against Iowa. Kofi blocked a shot of Luka Garza right at the end of the game. But nobody was here. That's when it was COVID and everything was closed and we couldn't have any fans. And then the next year we beat Iowa, last game of the season, and that was a packed house, and it happened to be to win a share of the Big Ten title. And so then confetti fell and they flooded the court, and it was just 2 great wins against an opponent that, of course, we love to beat around here, but the environments were starkly different. The first one was just pitch black around the outside, no one was in the building, and then the second one was confetti falling in a court full of people, and both were really cool.
I'm going to add on to that. I remember standing on that sideline, and the people were in the Orange Crush storming the court, and I nearly fell over because they were rushing the court so fast.
Yep.
It was insane.
I was here at the table and just held on. I was like, I'm just not going to move and let everybody get past me. And I got a picture in my office now that I took of like this view straight up with all the confetti coming down, and Brad signed it for me, and it's hanging in my office right now. It's a great memory.
Favorite moment you've ever had?
Man, I've got a lot to choose from, and that's tough. Messi scoring 3 goals in Chicago in 2016, Copa America in like 20 minutes is up on top of the list. The Illinois game where they won the share of the Big Ten championships on there too. I would say though that in 22, the NBA was turning 75, and they decided they were going to recognize the top 75 players in the history of the NBA at halftime of the All-Star game in Cleveland. And so I was working that game, and I got to be the voice on TNT and in the stadium for all 75 guys, the ones who were alive, as they walked out onto the court and got the applause they so richly deserved. And it was, to me, the biggest moment the NBA maybe has ever had to date as a collective. And I got to be there for that, introduce Michael Jordan and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and LeBron James, and like everybody was there. And it was something truly, truly special. And I hope somehow I get a way to beat that, but I can't think of what it would be, because that was kind of a once in a lifetime, it seems.
A 6-time NBA champion and 5-time league MVP, Michael Jordan. A 6-time NBA champion and 6-time league MVP, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. A 4-time NBA champion and 4-time league MVP from Akron, Ohio, LeBron James. A 5-time NBA champion and 18-time All-Star, Kobe Bryant. A 4-time NBA champion and 15-time All-Star, Shaquille O'Neal.
How about a funniest moment you've had?
I think funniest probably tend to lend to bloopers, like times I've messed up that have turned out to be funny. I called, Bojan Bogdanovic was visiting the Pacers after he had played there the first year I worked with the Pacers. He came back as a member of the Jazz. Domantas Sabonis is at the line going to shoot free throws, and I said Bojan Bogdanovic and didn't realize it. Domantas came over and gave me a hard time afterward. He was fine with it, but it was just one of those, what are you doing? But my brain was in a weird spot because he was back and I just wasn't thinking, said the wrong name. The funniest, though, and the most viral for sure, was at 2022 All-Star. Machine Gun Kelly was there with Megan Fox, and all the stars come out for All-Star. And so we try to introduce as many of them as we can to the crowd, and sometimes on television too, just so that they can kind of get recognition. And typically what happens is they slide a piece of paper in front of me and I just read it. I have no time to preset. I just look down and read. And the piece of paper they slid in front of me said, "Please welcome Machine Gun Kelly and his wife, Megan Fox." I remember thinking in the moment, I don't know that they're married. Maybe they got married, but I didn't have the time to fix it because I'm literally reading it out loud as I'm reading it in my head. And turns out not married, not engaged. They look at each other, kind of laugh. It was a little awkward, but it went viral. Like tens of millions of people have seen that video with me saying Machine Gun Kelly and his wife, Megan Fox. So now my director and I, every time I see him, I'm like, hey, remember that one time we married Machine Gun Kelly and Megan Fox? So we get a laugh out of it now, but it was unfortunate at the time.
Here's your song. Introduce Team Durant and Team LeBron. Please welcome Machine Gun Kelly and his wife, actress Megan Fox.
A big lead or a big game and just a big run is happening, and this place is literally shaking. What's going through your mind?
Well, first of all, you love it. You just got to soak it in. And I know I'm doing a job, but it's hard not to get wrapped up in all the craziness going on around you, especially because here I'm sitting like 10 feet in front of Crush. So everything they say is like directly into my ears. But first of all, it's a good thing. It talks about the state of where Illinois basketball is. Has obviously nothing to do with me, but the fact that people are that excited for their team in this arena is a great thing. for me, my real goal is just to try to be able to hear myself. A lot of times I'll wear headphones in Chicago at different events, but here I don't. I just have the mic. And so there are times that I'm saying what happened into the mic, and I couldn't be closer to myself than I am. And I can't even really hear what I'm saying. So the goal is to not blow my voice out trying to over project. I know the speakers will do that for me. It's just, let's get the point across. Most people don't. In those moments, they don't care anyway. So I'm going to do what I need to do and then get out and let them continue to enjoy the game.
Now you've been here for 10 years. What have you learned the most as far as longevity of being an announcer and kind of learning the ropes about everything?
Yeah, it's a tough question because I still feel like the new guy, and I know 10 years isn't new anymore. I think a couple of things. One, we've already touched on is it's being yourself, and I don't ever want to mimic someone else. I'm not an impressionist. I'm not here to try to channel my inner whoever. They didn't hire me to be a carbon copy of someone else. They hired me to be me. And so the first thing is, if you are yourself, you won't have to spend a decade pretending to be someone else. No one does that very well. It's usually pretty obvious. And it doesn't resonate in the room when games are happening. So the more I can be me, the better off I am. Now, if people don't like the real me over time, then that's a different story, and I could go find some place where they do. But when you're yourself, that's going to lead to success more often than not. The other thing I think is just trying to realize that you're not the show. I think a lot of people in this business go, oh, this is my part of the show. This is my part to shine. I'm going to make this a big thing about me. And I hope I've never done that. But the longer you go, the more you realize how much that's true. I'm a part of it, but I never want to stick out to the point that I'm a distraction. I often consider me to be like the band or the cheerleaders or the smell of the hot dogs and popcorn or Crush or whatever. If one of those things goes too far, if the band's out of tune, if the popcorn's been burnt, if Crush is screaming obscenities or whatever it is, and it's all of a sudden gone from being a great part of the environment to sticking out, that's a problem. And so for me, I don't ever want to be that thing that's sticking out past my area of responsibility and past the area of what makes sense and what's comfortable for fans. And that probably is going to take a lifetime to perfect, but hopefully in the last 10 years I've learned something along the way. Superficially, I get to know some of the players a little bit. If they saw me, they'd say hello or we chat before a game. But I think most of the relationships I've developed in this industry have been either with coaches or staff members who are around longer than most players would be. Typically, players are here 2 years, 3 years, depending. But coaches and staff members and, at State Farm Center, security people and people who work in the office, like those are the real relationships that have lasted, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And so those are the ones I treasure more than anything. When I worked for the Pacers for a couple of years in Indy, there was a security guard who sat at the end of the tunnel. The team would run out, but it was also where I came in and out. His name was Jerry, older guy, probably 70. And I would just stand there for 15, 20 minutes before every game and just talk to him. I was there a year and a half, but I still see him regularly when I'm in Indy working events, and we still sit and talk for 15 or 20 minutes, and he's like, I don't know if it's a grandfather or just like my dad's friend but we talk all the time. And I've got a bunch of those people you just see every day when you're at the arena or at the stadium. You say hi to, you get to know each other, about their families, and those are the ones that are super cool because one, there's some longevity there. You see them every game for years and years and years, and man, I cherish those for sure.
Who is your best friend?
That's a good question. I've got a couple, both of which I get to work with on a regular basis. One, his name is Tico, and he is the Spanish public address announcer for the Fire. I've been there 11 years. He's been there 7 or 8, and so we sit right next to each other for every game. Thankfully, he knows plenty of English, speaks it fluently, so we can communicate, because I only know a little bit of Spanish. But we get together and get along great, and always have a ton of fun. So he's been one of them. And then Rick is the other. I met him here at Illinois, actually working women's basketball games, and turns out we became friends, and he's a huge Bears fan. So when I got the Bears job, I needed a spotter, someone to help me pick out who's on the field and who's doing what. And I asked if he'd be interested, and he thought about it for like half a second, and was like, absolutely. And so we get to go to all the Bears games together, and frequently get together outside that too for lunch or just to hang out. So those are my guys.
What does it mean to you when people say Illini men's basketball is not the same without Tim Sinclair?
Well, at first blush, it's I question if that's true, but I appreciate it for sure, and it's humbling to have the job for one, much less have people enjoy me doing the job and truly think that there is something I bring to the table that would make this experience better than what it would be without me. So it's very appreciated. It's, as a kid, if you'd told 13 or 14-year-old Tim that he was going to be sitting here doing this job, I never would have believed you. And so I don't ever take a game for granted or the opportunity for granted. I often think about, I went to not a ton of games as a kid. I went to a few Bulls games. I went to one my junior year in high school to see Michael play, hear the introductions and the lights go down and Sirius start playing it. And so I know most people, when they come to one of the arenas that I work, that's probably maybe their only time, or one of just a handful of times they get to experience that type of game in person. And so for me, that just puts a good pressure on to go, I'm going to bring it today, because I don't want this person's one time at a Bulls game or at an Illini game to be less than incredible. And so it never gets stale, it never gets old. I always try to bring my best for that reason. And if people are feeling like they appreciate that in the end, then that's a really, really good thing, and I'm honored. Less is more is one of them. Fewer words are always better than more, as long as you've done due diligence to get your point across. The show isn't about you. No one, except for maybe my kids, and probably not even them, would be like, hey, we get to hear Tim at the game tonight. I'm not foolish enough to believe that anybody thinks that. They're here to see Illinois, or they're going to a Bears game or to a Bulls game to see the Bears and Bulls, and I'm just part of that. So I'm not the show, and I think that's important to remember. And then I think the reflecting what the crowd is or should be feeling, and I know I've said all these in different ways, but my job is not to fake people into being excited for something that they're not excited about. And so don't always be at 11. I couldn't be the same volume the whole one. It takes a lot of work and a lot of energy to be there the whole time, and it gets annoying. Like, no one wants that. So if it's a good play in the first quarter or the first half, I'm excited about it. If it's a great play near the end of the second half or the fourth quarter, I'm really excited about it, because that's what the crowd is feeling in that moment, and hopefully we're playing off each other. So all of those are little techniques and things from working in TV and working in radio that just kind of directly apply here in public address, and I think for the most part there's a pretty equal correlation, which is kind of fun.
What advice would you give to young PA announcers?
I have like a list of 4 things that I tell people who ask that question, who are wanting to get into sports broadcasting or being a PA, but I think this goes for most any job, and it's this: ability, availability, humility, and flexibility. And ability is just be good at what you do, always work hard to get better, never settle, never think you've arrived, always try to get good and then keep getting better at what you do. Availability is when you're invited to do what it is you want to do, take them up on the offer. If people call once or twice and you keep saying no, they're probably not going to call back. So if you can be available, that's half the battle. When people need someone, show up. And that's going to mean sacrifice. It's going to mean taking time away from family and friends and maybe spending money on gas or not getting out to do whatever you want to do, but take advantage of those opportunities. Humility, there are a whole lot of divas in this business who try to make life difficult for everyone else to get what they want. Be easy to work with. No one likes working with someone who's difficult or is a diva. So be friendly, be accommodating, be willing to do what you're asked and then some, and you'll get called back a lot more often than if you didn't. And then flexibility, be willing to try new things and be willing to give a shot when someone says, hey, can you? Sure. Maybe you're going to be good at it and maybe you'll do a lot more of it. Maybe you're not, but at least you know, and at least you've been a person who says yes more often than no to those who are asking. And I think those 4 things will get you a long, long way. You know, it's interesting. I get the question a lot, you know, who's your influence in the industry? And while there's lots of guys I respect and appreciate and grew up listening to, Ray Clay with the Bulls, Jim Shepard here at Illinois, Gene Honda, even with some of the stuff he's doing in Chicago and here at Illinois. My biggest influences have been people who've just taught me about communication or about life. A lot of them have been in radio, a few in TV, who just are good at sort of putting something into a small nugget that I can remember that then I can translate to my job as a PA announcer. For example, in radio, we always used to get taught, take as much time as you need, but as little time as possible. And that is great advice when it comes to being a PA announcer. I could go on and on and on about any number of things, but it's not necessary. And people aren't there for me. They're there for what's happening on the field or on the court. So my job is to take as much time as I need to accurately explain what happened or what a crowd needs to know, and then get out of the way. And so take that first exit, to use an old Seinfeld reference, like do what you need to do and then get out. And so those pieces of advice from bosses in the past and people who've sort of air checked me as I've gone through my media career have really helped a whole lot in my career here behind the mic at sporting events.
Tim, the State Farm Center here has hosted the high school basketball for men's for the last years, of course, and we're lucky enough to have it extended through 2029. But when you're calling the games here, it's a different form of basketball. It's high school compared to college. What's it like for you to kind of witness different basketball, but maybe there are future players that are coming here as well?
Yeah, it's fun for me, one, to get to call guys who could be the next college star, the next NBA star when they're in high school. A number of years ago, I did the Jordan Brand Classic, and so Derek Lively and Brandon Miller and a lot of those guys were in that game. So to now see them in the NBA, it's sort of fun to track their progress. And so I definitely feel that here. The other thing that makes it special for me is that before the tournament moved to Peoria, back in 1996, I believe was the first year in Peoria, I was one game away with my high school team from making it to play here in 1995. That was the year Kevin Garnett came with Ronnie Fields, and so we lost in the super sectional, but came 2 days later to Assembly Hall at the time to watch the other games, and that was the last year they had it for 25 years. Little did I know then that 25 years later I would be calling the games when they're back on this floor. And so for me, yes, I love seeing the players. I love sort of picking out who's going to be who at the next level. But also there's something special for me going, man, if the guy who was calling the Bulls back when I was in high school was calling my games, like that would have been super cool to me. And so hopefully there's some... it makes it a little bit more special for the kids who come and play here in the state tournament that I'm here as well, and I enjoy it regardless.
To receive your first place, Class 4A trophy.
Thank you. Congratulations. Keep doing this, man. Next time. I'll go. Bother you guys.
You've been out to LA for a lot of State Farm commercials, but kind of talk us through. I mean, you weren't on set with her, Caitlin Clark, but you've seen them. You've seen Jimmy Fallon, Chris Paul. I mean, what was it like for you and kind of being a part of that?
Yeah, I was against all odds asked to be in a State Farm commercial last fall that started airing during NBA All-Star Weekend this year, and being in it and being on TV is great. It's fun. To me, just the behind the scenes was far better than any of that. Just to see how they go together. These are Hollywood film directors who are directing these commercials, and to see how the microphones go on and how many different cameras are there. And they had the one I was in had a tree across the hood of a car. Well, first of all, it was a fake tree, and they had a fake tree guy who was like making sure the tree looked real, even though it wasn't. So like all those little bits and pieces that go into putting together a commercial, there are hundreds of people there on set. That was the cool part for me, and I'm glad it made it to television. I'm glad people saw it and thought it was funny. But for me, it's all that minutia behind the scenes to kind of know how the sausage was made, so to speak. That was a lot of fun.
And if fans only knew the 45-year-old's voice, now they know his face too. From a new national commercial for State Farm.
I went, and the director was talking to me right before we went on set and said, okay, you're going to do this, then you're going to do this, then you kind of look here, and then you sing the jingle. And I went, excuse me, what? Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. And every time it airs somewhere, I'll get text or social media messages from someone goes, what? Question mark, exclamation point, what in the world? So that is fun to know that people are seeing it.
Plus, how about this? After he missed a recent Bulls game, Nikola Vucevic said the energy just wasn't the same without him. Once upon a time, life's blueprint was to build, but clearly Sinclair made the right choice to use his voice.
The starting lineup for your Chicago Bulls.
What would you tell the young Tim to where you're currently at?
First of all, I'd say you're not going to believe what's about to happen, because I never would have. Like, you could have tried to convince me, and I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. But I think what I'd say is don't try to rush anything, and every part of your journey has a purpose. I can look back at radio jobs and times when I freelanced and my time in television and even some writing I've done where I was just trying to do the next thing that came up and that I found interesting. But every one of those things had a piece that I'm taking now and using in what I do today. So don't take for granted what you're doing now, because you can use parts of it later to do what you really want to do. And then don't rush it. It's, for some, I think I've heard like, oh, it must be an overnight success or what. I mean, it's been 15 years of just doing PA, and then I was in radio for a long time before that. So don't rush those things. Enjoy them, take advantage of them, and then use them to your benefit later with little bits and pieces that you've learned along the way. And I think I've done some of that, but knowing that and feeling that along the way and realizing that everything's going to be okay, the right thing is going to happen, just keep plodding along, would have been helpful in the moment.
5 to 10 years down the line, is this something you want to keep doing?
The easy answer is yes. I mean, I plan that they have to drag me out of any of these arenas kicking and screaming when they want me to leave. So I plan to be here for as long as they'll have me. But I also know that like 5 or 10 years ago, if you'd asked me what I would be doing in 5 or 10 years, I never would have picked this. I never could have seen this coming. And I was enjoying what I was doing then in television and radio. And so what else is there? I don't know. If it's better than this, it would be, I can't even imagine what that would be. But I plan to be here, and if there are other opportunities, then those are going to fit in around the other things that I'm already doing, because I don't want to leave any of them anytime soon.
Thank you so much for what you do for Illini program, because you bring so much excitement to each game and night in, night out. So I appreciate you taking the time with me, and I look forward to sharing your journey with a lot of people.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.